Hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining us once again for Saturday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Dave Percy. Starting off with the hazardous weather graphic, all that's on there today, a continuation of what we had yesterday, and that's a smoke advisory for the Kenai Peninsula and up into western Prince William Sound for the reduced visibilities caused by the smoke that's been drifting around the area, and will probably continue to do so at least through, well, definitely tonight, could become a little bit more widespread tonight due to the stabilizing nature of the atmosphere, and then also with the southwest breeze continuing, probably see surges of that coming up into the northern Cook Inlet area, possibly into the Matanuska southern Susitna Valley. And also, not an advisory, but the smoke up in the interior, those conditions expected to continue as well, although good southwest flow coming into that area will probably improve things during the day tomorrow. But today we had extreme fire danger over all of the Yukon Delta zone, Yukon Flats, kind of an expansion here, both of the high and extreme fire danger with areas of extreme in toward the Kobuk Valley, also down into the Copper River Basin areas, and a little bit over the 40-mile country, and a little bit wider area of high to very high fire danger, southern Susitna Valley and western central Kenai Peninsula. Moving on to satellite imagery, I can see still high pressure controlling the weather here, well from the Gulf of Alaska right up into the northern interior. And around that we've got a fetch of moisture with low pressure out over the far western Bering Sea. And you can see that with the front right here pushing eastward toward the Pueblos and slowing down. But that moisture coming up and over the top and kind of sliding back to the east-southeast here across the North Slope and the Arctic coast with occasional surges of moisture, light rain, fog, drizzle, that sort of thing in those areas. And that's occurring right down into the Bering Strait as well. Southeast coast seeing a lot of low clouds and fog inside waters. They're slowly clearing out during the morning hours and into the afternoon, but hanging across Dixon Entrance and right up along the coastline of the southeast coast. Otherwise, partly sunny skies there. And the Gulf of Alaska, got an area of fog here, pretty good fog bank actually, just east of Kodiak Island, on up and moved over Middleton Island late this morning, just before noon. Their visibility went to a quarter mile in dense fog. Otherwise, still the smoke here on the Kenai Peninsula, of course, and also up here in the interior, which shows up as the gray here on the satellite imagery over the interior. You see smoke all the way over to just about Eagle and then extending back to the southwest, and the symbol covers it over the Kenai Peninsula area. Low clouds, fog, Bering, or the Bristol Bay area into the southeast Bering, up along the southwest coast, and again over the off the coast of the Panhandle into Dixon Entrance. And here's that frontal boundary that brought areas of light precipitation from the northwest coast, Point Hope, Cape Lisburne, down to Bering Strait, to western Seward Peninsula, but all light amounts here, extending all the way down to Adak and Atka, just being pretty persistent over the central Aleutians. High pressure, light winds, so a lot of low clouds, fog here, as I just mentioned, and the forecast for tonight. Front doesn't really move too much, begins to weaken, especially here in the southern portion, really washing out with some drizzle, light rain, or fog. Now probably will possibly increase a little bit as this thing drags across the Pribilof Islands, but amounts won't be too much at all. Otherwise, behind that, high pressure sort of building back in and drying it out with light winds. A warm front with a pretty good slug of moisture could bring some moderate rainfall late tonight, or more likely tomorrow, here to the western central Aleutians, with a little bit of an increase in the winds. Otherwise, dry south central Alaska, but later tonight, after midnight and going in toward morning, you're going to start seeing showers begin to develop here, actually from Nenana area, possibly Denali Park, all the way down along the western Alaska Range, and that'll continue to increase throughout the day tomorrow. And you'll see for Sunday, we've got little showers into the afternoon become even more widespread, with thunderstorms developing along as well. And that'll be slipping on up into the central Tanana Valley and into the central Tanana Valley probably by early evening, but will occur to the west into the Koyukuk up toward Bettles earlier than that, probably by late afternoon. Otherwise, eastern interior dry again, highs 80 to 85 north of the Alaska Range, lower 70s for the southeast Brooks Range, Arctic Village. Look for a high of 72 tomorrow. Copper River Basin, highs near 90, Gulkana, Glen Allen, those areas. Otherwise 80s and 80 to 85, northern Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula, Manusquesit Valley. Another sunny day for Kodiak Island. Outlook for Monday. Partly mostly sunny, especially in the afternoon here for the Panhandle. Maybe the low clouds fog condition possibly decreasing, but hanging along the coast would be the best chance of seeing it. But this really just a dry trough here into the Gulf of Alaska. High pressure building back in western and southwest Alaska turns the flow offshore, so we heat up once again with just nothing but sunshine here. Kodiak Island right up into the interior toward the Brooks Range. A couple of disturbances skirting the central western Arctic coast for a little bit of moisture with each one of those that pass by, but again, mounts very light. Afternoon showers possible, North Slope, Brooks Range, and more organized, better organized system out here over the Bering Sea. You can see a couple of lows, and they're traveling northeast. It's helping build this ridge up, and actually the combination of the two is going to direct all the moisture and energy up to the north and clipping the northwest part of the state. Looking at the low temperatures for tonight, again, quite mild. 60 to 65 for the lows here in the Tanana Valley, lower 60s upper Yukon Valley, 60 all the way back toward Minchumina, and lower 50s, otherwise 40s everywhere else except Kaktovik, lows 37. Highs for tomorrow, not bad here over the Panhandle, 70s, upper 60s along the coast, near 90 Copper River Basin, 75 to 85 south central Alaska, and 75 to 80 central Tanana Valley, but up into the lower to mid 80s from Tok up to Eagle. Lower 50s central Arctic coast, cooling into the 50s back here to the west. And then for Monday morning lows, even the Arctic coast everywhere above 40 degrees with temperatures near 60 for the lows, starting to cool off a little bit here up over the eastern interior areas after that system moves up to the northeast there. So we've got 40s, lower to mid here, back along the southwest interior and the coast. Near 50 for the North Gulf Coast, southeast coast, in the 50s for your lows. Mid 50s, mid to upper 50s, south central Alaska. And that'll be followed by afternoon highs. Cooler, upper 60s and near 70. Eastern interior areas still 70 to 80 in south central Alaska and the Copper River Basin.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving into flying weather, solid IFR here from the Aleutians in across all the Bering Sea up to St. Lawrence Island, eastward to the Yukon Delta coast and especially Nunivak Island. IFR Bering Strait and along and south of the, along on the south coast of the Seward Peninsula and Nome, maybe over toward White Mountain and north, mostly off the Arctic coast there except the east side. VFR in the interior. And some IFR due to low clouds and fog here, marine layer along the southeast coast, especially over the southern inside waters. And that should burn off by the afternoon there, but hanging along the much of the southeast coastline, outer coastline, otherwise VFR. VFR in the interior, here's that batch of moisture sliding northeastward. And it'll be developing, thunderstorms increasing with that as it moves northeastward. So it could possibly go IFR in the afternoon around Denali Park and through Windy Pass there, and that area will be slipping on up into the central Tanana Valley by early evening. Marginal VFR making some headway eastward here into the western interior with the IFR, Bering Sea and Aleutians. And then for Monday morning, IFR pushes eastward here across portions of the Yukon Delta, and even in toward maybe Togiak Bay or the Southwest Mountains. And we've got some IFR along the Alaska Range, the Brooks Range, and some VFR scattered around as well, and IFR along the southeast coast and the southern inside waters. And for the afternoon, kind of a repeat, except it looks like it'll stay a little more marginal over the southern panhandle, but VFR everywhere else there. minus the coast with the low clouds and fog right along the coastline. VFR, much interior Alaska. Zone of marginal VFR up over the Brooks Range. IFR, mostly along or off the Arctic coast. And not much change here over the Bering Sea and Aleutians with IFR, although the lee side of the Alaska Peninsula here and even the eastern Aleutians due to southeast flow. It looks like VFR there. In fact, Alaska Peninsula mostly VFR as well as Kodiak Island. And for passes tomorrow, Anatuvik, southwest flow, bringing moisture northeastward, so starting out VFR, and at some point in the mid or later part of the afternoon going marginal. Same forecast trend for Adigan and Lake Clark and Merrill. VFR the entire day, although there'll be clouds and showers around, but they'll be developing, but they'll be of the VFR variety. However, for rainy, probably going marginal VFR in the latter part of the afternoon, and windy, as I mentioned, possibly going IFR. And for Isabel, VFR, Mentasta, VFR, and Tanita and Portage, both another VFR day for Sunday, and Chilcoot and White, VFR. Freezing levels, upper level high here, right along the North Gulf Coast. So with that, the 12,000 foot freezing level is pretty high there. In fact, 8,000 feet all the way up off the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. And then the trough and cooler conditions here tomorrow morning with 6,000 feet there, and the upper level trough axis right in here. That's going to be swinging northeastward. And moving on to icing, lots of icing here, but above 12,000 feet over the central western Aleutians, spreading northeastward. And then that zone coming up along the western Alaska Range, Kuskokwim Valley, and some more up there along the north slope, actually from the Kobuk, Noatak valleys northward to the Arctic coast. And for the jet stream, upper level high pressure here over the Gulf of Alaska, southern Alaska ridging northward. So we've got southwest flow here, 70 to 90 knots. Coming in tomorrow toward the Seward Peninsula. High pressure ridging over the Panhandle, 9,000 feet, 30 to 35 knots here, maybe as high as 40 knots on the western Arctic coast, and then a little lighter here, southwest 20 over the southern part of the state or southern interior, down to 10 knots for the Alaska Peninsula and Bristol Bay. High pressure, light winds, Gulf of Alaska, North Gulf Coast areas. Northwest 5 to 10 over the Panhandle, pretty light winds there. And eastern Aleutians as well, light winds with high pressure just to your south, and then the winds kind of pick up here over the Aleutians at 25 to 30 knots. 3,000 feet, again, about the same pattern here, a little different in the orientation. 20 to 30 knot winds there over the Aleutians between this high and the low farther to the west. Not too bad in the winds, although picking up to 25 knots, west-southwest St. Lawrence Island, turning south-southwest at 30 knots here, northwest interior, light over the eastern interior, just 5 to 15 knots, 5 to 10 knot winds, southern Alaska, and looks like 5 to 10 for the Panhandle. Turbulence, light to isolated moderate chop, St. Lawrence Island through the Strait to Cape Lisburne, as well as the west central Aleutians.
When you think of a national park, you probably envision wide open natural spaces undisturbed by human activity. There are indeed such places, but even in some of the most remote areas of a place like Kenai Fjords National Park in Alaska, the mark of man is present. Marine debris is a menace to the farthest reaches of our globe, and even designated national park lands are not immune. In the summer of 2009, the Resurrection Bay Conservation Alliance, a grassroots conservation organization based in Seward, Alaska, decided to do something about the marine debris fouling the beaches of Kenai Fjords National Park. Marine debris coordinator Tim Johnson had first-hand experience with the issue.
The summer before, my wife and I, Michelle, had done a paddle from Seward, sea kayak paddle from Seward to Homer. Really, our eyes were open to some areas that we didn't realize there was so much accumulation. It was very deceiving up front. You couldn't really get a feel for the extent and impact of it. You've got this nice high tide line that's quite pristine, and you really don't get a picture for the impact, the amount of debris in that area until you get behind those storm berms. You get back into the lagoons and the vegetation around those lagoons. And then you see the absolute extent back into that veg and how intertwined and enmeshed these decades of trash deposition. So we were just appalled by that and said we got to get something together on a larger scale.
The Resurrection Bay Conservation Alliance is a local nonprofit community organization, and they have been instrumental in helping the Park Service obtain funding to get larger boats to help move the debris, and they get volunteer labor and organize the work trips. And so it's really a partnership between the Park Service and the community to help get out and really get a project done that in and of itself any one group couldn't do on their own.
Most of that trash was baggable. However, there were large items, huge, piles of hauser line, for example, that we just had to hoist up onto the boat.
The volunteers didn't just bag, haul, and hoist the garbage, but also carefully recorded what types of debris were collected.
In many ways, the debris itself is a resource. Archaeologists use middens, the trash heaps, as a way of analyzing past cultures. And in one sense, marine debris is a form of a midden. It's a trash heap that left for the future would be something that people could use to analyze our culture. It may not say the best things about our culture or everything that we want, but we need to be able to document what we've done so that we can preserve that legacy, make sure that we as a society don't forget what we've been doing.
We had two larger categories of marine debris that we picked up. Commercial fishing means like, say, gill nets, large hauser lines, anything that would be associated with more of a commercial fishing scale. And then the second category was more recreational fishing and household, which would be general plastics, things like that. So we had about a 75% of the commercial fishing marine debris element, and about 25% of the recreational and household further out the bay. And we had the exact opposite the closer we got to Seward. Within the bay, it was about 25% commercial fishing versus 75% recreational fishing and household.
The trash is not just unsightly for park visitors, but also poses threats to wildlife and marine habitat.
Really one of the larger issues now that you go to this plastic that can really get into the food web and affect the food web differently than something like glass.
These substances, for instance, all these polystyrene blocks that are breaking down into all these little crumbly bits are further breaking down on a microscopic level, and how much of an impact that has, in this ecosystem is yet to be determined, but I think it's got pretty high potential.
Well known that sea turtles will eat plastic bags floating in the water. They look like jellyfish to a sea turtle, and obviously a plastic bag doesn't go well in the digestive system of a turtle. Albatross will see small pieces of plastic floating on the surface and think they're small fish and other food sources, and eat that in their stomachs, especially in some of the northwestern Hawaiian Islands. They'll find dead albatross that have starved to death with a full stomach, and it's full of pieces of plastic.
We're affecting our local areas this way, but we need to be thinking about it from more of a state and global, international scale. And most importantly, to try and focus on prevention of it coming in the first place. Because we're just going to see this continuing, to build up on our beaches unless we're able to get a little bit more of an approach on prevention on the front end.
Marine debris is really a global problem, in all the oceans, and there are many different sources. Global shipping is one. Fishing debris from commercial fishing, recreational boating activity on land, stuff blowing off land, washing down streams, people just throwing stuff on the shore.
Though the problem can seem overwhelming, Johnson remains upbeat about making a positive difference.
No, you gotta start locally. You gotta take control of what you can do, and make something with that, and try and move on from there.
Overall, more than 9 tons of debris was removed from the beaches of Kenai Fjords National Park and transported back to Seward to be deposited in a landfill.
People gave a lot to the project in order to make it happen. That was awesome. One of the most amazing experiences I've ever had. Being able to put that large of a group of volunteers together, dedicated volunteers to put that much effort and give that much time and pull all the different agencies together to see it all happen was incredible. It was incredible. Yeah, very fulfilling experience.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Today's sea ice analysis, virtually unchanged, at least looking at it on this scale from what we had yesterday. Still that open area here north of the eastern coast, and still some heavy ice right along the eastern coast on over toward the central areas, then really lightening up here as you go down the coastline to nothing. And Chukchi Sea about the same as it's been, and no big changes are expected for the next 5 days. Coastal water forecast. West winds 15 for the north coast of the Panhandle, northwest 15, central and southern coast. Light westerlies for Clarence Strait with seas 2 feet or less, south 15. Stevens Passage and Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay. That holds for Lynn Canal in those areas on Monday, south 15, 3-foot seas. Really light variable winds in store for the central and southern inside waters with slight seas. Coast, so a little breezy in areas comparatively. Northwest 15 to 20, 5-foot seas, and then west-northwest 15 on the north coast. For Cook Inlet tomorrow, we got small craft advisories here for the area of Cook Inlet south of the Forelands. 25-knot winds with 5-foot seas, west 20 for Kamishak Bay, northern Cook Inlet, southwest at 20. And 20 to 25 knot winds here from the Barren Islands out of the southwest and all of the North Gulf Coast, seas running 5 to 6 feet. And for Monday, Prince William Sound, light northwest at 10 knots and west 20 for the eastern North Gulf Coast. Small craft advisories coming up here for the western North Gulf Coast at 25 knots, west 30 knots, the Barren Islands, and back to west 25 for Kamishak Bay. Lighter winds from Cook Inlet, for Cook Inlet, westerlies 10 to 15 knots. And for Bristol Bay, west 15 tomorrow, and the Alaska Peninsula, 10-knot winds, Bering Sea side out of the south, Pacific side out of the west, west 15 as you head up towards Sitkinak, and small craft advisories for Kodiak Island, southwest 25. And for Monday, westerly winds, keep the small craft advisories here on the eastern marine zones of the island, up to 25 knots, and then 20-knot winds out of the west back to Castle Cape from Sitkinak, and southwest 15 here on the Pacific side of the peninsula, south 15 on the Bering Sea side, and southwest 15 for Bristol Bay. And for the western Aleutians, east winds at about 20 knots tomorrow, seas 6 feet. Southeast 25, small craft advisory, say from Kiska over toward Adak, and then Adak and Atka zones, south to southeast at 20 knots with 10 to 15 knot winds from the south-southwest for the Fox Islands. Those begin to pick up, especially in the afternoon here, with small craft advisories developing there on the north shore of the Unalaska Island area, and 25 to 30 knot winds for Inmac Island. Gales back in the picture here with that organized set of storms coming into the Bering Sea. So we got south winds 35 knots, seas building to 11 feet, and those gale warnings extend all the way to at least Amchitka, and then northeast 20 for the far western zone. And for tomorrow, for the northern Bering Sea, southwest here 20 knots on up into St. Lawrence Island. West 15 south of Nunivak Island, really light southerlies, so the Pribilofs only 10 knots. Small craft advisories for St. Matthew Island for 25 knot winds and seas as high as 8 feet. And then for Monday, south 20 St. Lawrence Island, small craft advisories now north of Nunivak Island along the Yukon Delta coast. Same thing for the St. Matthew Island zone. 30 knot winds, southerlies at 30 for the Pribilof, 7-foot seas. And up along the Arctic coast, southerlies 20 knots from Wales, all the way up the west side here, southeast 20 on the central coast, turning east, and then small craft advisories for the far eastern zone. Those swing around to the west 15 to 20 knots for the eastern stretch of the coastline, central coast, south 20, and then good small craft advisories, southerlies at 30 knots here, all the way down to Cape Thompson, turning southwest at 30 from Cape Thompson to Wales. And for tonight again, smoke advisory continues, Kenai Peninsula tonight and through tomorrow, and tomorrow night with developing showers, and we'll see those turn into thunderstorms tomorrow from the western Alaska Range, possibly as far east as Mount Susitna, and then spreading into the Tanana Valley. Rain pushes into the Aleutians, and sunny and hot continues here, central, southern interior. Cooler back to the west as soon as you get into the cloud deck there. The chance of rain along the Yukon Delta coast, and then the gale force winds and rain, possibly moderate to maybe heavy at times for the central Aleutians, sliding right up to St. Lawrence Island, kind of unsettled along the Arctic coast and North Slope.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.